Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world show made for the fans by a fan. I am your host, as always, Richard Tiemann. This is the award-winning Fan Show. Got a great special for you today. In fact, this episode was supposed to be part of our regular programming tomorrow night, but the conversation, you know how they go. You set aside, a handful of questions you want to ask. Of those questions, the top 3 or 4 that you really need to ask. And then the conversation just kind of goes. If you get to all of them, great. If not, it's whatever. But you've got 10 to 15 minutes. Well, we went over 30, my guest and I, today. So this is going to be an impromptu special. So this is the first ever, this is the debut special under the Wrestling Shield. That's right, Fan Show Wrestling Division, its debut special right now. I have a special guest, and him and I talked, like I said, for over a half hour. It was such a great time. Jon Robinson, he's the author of Creating the Mania, and you can follow him on Twitter at JRobandSteel. He also did Ultimate Warrior, Life Lived Forever. And he's a self-proclaimed Tecmo Bowl wizard. But John and I had a great conversation. Of course, we just had NXT TakeOver War Games, which was another phenomenal, even though they don't have AJ Styles. But it was, seriously, you know how I like to not use that word very often, but it was a phenomenal event. NXT, man, they know how to deliver. Like, you know, give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and not even in a bad way. They work with what they've got, and they're spinning gold right now. They really are. Survivor Series, in my opinion, and we do talk about it, was probably the best of the major 4 this year for WWE, and the best, as a result, pay-per-view. For the year 2018. Ronda Rousey against Charlotte was an incredible match. The women continue to exceed whatever bar there is left for the women's division. And then we had a great 5-on-5. I was surprised that SmackDown swept. I'm surprised that Raw swept. I really am. It'll be interesting to see the direction that they choose to go headed into 2019 in the Rumble. And up next is TLC, of course, but, we're all focused on the Rumble, which is the springboard into Mania. It's basically the dress rehearsal for WrestleMania. We start to see storylines take shape or get finalized. And we talk a lot about that. He got to shadow Triple H, among others, backstage while he wrote this book, Creating the Mania. And it's sort of a tell-all about that. Some great stories here. We talk about a lot as far as what Raw plans to do in the absence of Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Braun Strowman, Drew McIntyre. SmackDown, some theories as to why they got swept, the last-minute title change between AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan. And some people who, up until the gorilla position in their entrance music hit, still thought that they were going to change their mind as to whether or not they were going to win a particular match. So all that and much, much more. Survivor Series, again, was great. If you've got the network, go and watch it. If you've already watched it, watch it again, because I've been a critic all year. I really have. I've been tough on WWE, but I will say that the Survivor Series hit it home. It brought it home. And Brock versus Daniel Bryan, wow. When Brock wants to perform, he performs, man. When he wants to be what everybody, the reason, when he wants to be the reason that everybody wanted him to come back in the first place, it is something special. It is magic. So go and watch it. It was, there's not really a lot of critique that I have for Survivor Series. The 5-on-5 women's one was odd. I didn't like that they gave Nia Jax the sole survivor spot, but that's just me being, salty about injuring Becky. We talk about that, and I'll quit saying what we talk about. We'll just hop right to it. So enjoy myself and a conversation with Jon Robinson. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me now is a wrestling enthusiast just such as myself, and we just got done watching Survivor Series, of course, and there was NXT TakeOver. We're going to talk all about that, as well as Creating the Mania. It's the man responsible for that great read. It is Jon Robinson. Jon, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, man. No, I'm excited to come on and talk some Survivor Series.
Yeah, it is one of WWE's big 4, and as we know, with that, it kind of helps close out one year and springboard us into the next, and now it's just sort of a waiting game until the Rumble, and then, of course, WrestleMania, and I gotta say, been a fan of wrestling for years and years now, and it seems like it gets not necessarily faster paced, but almost like the years seem shorter. Every year at Mania, we already hear about their plans for next Mania, and I don't remember that was always a thing where they were already planning a year in advance. In fact, I think the first time that they actually full-on, outwardly, openly planned a year in advance was Cena versus The Rock at WrestleMania 28. But now it seems like all their dominoes are put in place to fall right for Mania. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but your thoughts on where WWE is in their creative and writing and how far in advance they plan things, and if you're a fan of it, if you're not, and what you'd like to see happen.
Oh, actually, it's interesting because we go into that a lot in the book Creating the Mania, that, for years they planned about a year in advance, and they tried to work backwards. And last year's WrestleMania was the first one where they knew Lesnar versus Roman Reigns was going to be the main event for a year. Like, behind the scenes, they knew that was locked in.
Wow.
But the rest of the card, they really didn't know, and it's a lot of because of injuries. Like, they were hoping for Dean against Seth last year. And then when Dean got injured, all those plans went away. They were building toward Jason Jordan versus Kurt Angle last year. And then, when Jason unfortunately suffered his injury, a lot of dominoes fell a different direction. So I think, that's the big thing. And you see it again this year. I really think they were looking toward doing Roman Reigns versus The Rock as the main event in this year's WrestleMania. Obviously, with Roman's unfortunate news, and man, we're all praying for him. But, in terms of the storyline, I think they're scrambling, and they're really looking to see, what to do next.
So as someone who's clearly done his homework on what it takes to create a WrestleMania, like, what all do you touch on in your book that someone who would like to have a little bit of insight behind the scenes would be mostly interested in?
Oh, man, it goes into everything from, I talked to the head of creative for Raw, the head of creative for SmackDown, the Road Dogg, surprisingly. I think a lot of people know him, on his character. Some people know that he works behind the scenes, but they might not realize that he's the head writer for SmackDown. I think that's interesting. I even talked to a lot of the guys on the business standpoint. I talked to, a television director of how they capture the shots. I tried to ask him of, who's responsible for the 2,000 camera cuts of every match. Kind of it dives deep, and then there's an interview with all the talent. And what's really I think unique about the book is the interviews are really an honest look at like their year and the year in the making of WrestleMania. So, when I talk to The Miz, he talks about what it's like to actually get traded from, Raw to SmackDown, and how the talent doesn't actually know until the fans know. So what you're seeing are the honest reactions during the superstar shakeup and how it affects their lives, because, their travel schedule is totally different, and, they're getting separated from friends, and, it might one day might not seem like a big thing, but, to them, it throws their lives in upheaval.
Oh,
and, I talked to everyone from, Roman to, it's cool. There's a chapter on like the Usos and, how they were trying to get on the main card for the first time and what it meant to them. And they talk a lot about their rivalry with the New Day and, how it built up. And they even talk about, how hard they're swinging those kendo sticks, which you saw in Survivor Series. Man, there's no joke. But, last year, if you remember Hell in a Cell, they tuned Xavier Woods up, pretty hardcore. And, they talked about their old school playing Little League and, swinging for home runs. So what's cool about the book is, each chapter kind of focuses on a different guy. Like Ricochet has a chapter talking about NXT, Jeff Jarrett talking about the Hall of Fame, and it goes pretty in depth with each guy. It's funny because creative told me that they were looking to do, a Finn Balor Kane match. And part of the reason they wanted to have Finn Balor was to come out as the demon in front of, 70,000 plus people. And then I talked to Finn, and he's like, man, that's not what we're doing. Like, that might be their plan, but I'm not doing the demon this year. He wanted to be, Balor for all, Balor for everyone. And it's funny because he told me, he's like, yeah, it's a secret what I'm doing. Only, I know, Vince knows, and Hunter knows, and that's it. So he's like, creative might be planning for the demon, but the demon's not coming. so it's kind of interesting to see, how everything works together. And behind the scenes to what you see on television, it's not so simple. Like, I could sit here all day on Twitter and be like, oh, I want to see AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels, and how come I don't see, I don't know, Daniel Bryan against The Miz in Hell in a Cell or whatever. I could fantasy book as much as I want, but it's a lot harder than I think people give creative credit for, to put on a show that there's no off season and there's no rest, and people get injured all the times, and storylines change, in the blink of an eye. And, one thing they talk about too is that, the creative team will come up with a storyline. They'll all agree with it. The talent will be all in. And then at the last second, Vince can be like, nah, I don't like it anymore. Or, that's just not what I want to do. And, that's in the book a lot, where Road Dogg talks about it. Like, he'll come up with plans. Everyone loves it. And then Vince, at the last second, he'll just say no, or he'll change his mind. And he'll change his mind, like, at the show. New Day and Usos talk about it. They said, I forget which match they were having, but or which one they're talking about in the book, because they had such a series of matches. But like, they showed up and they were told, oh, Usos are going over, and then a half hour later they're told, the agent came up and said, oh, New Day's winning. And then right before they went out, they switched it again, and we're like, oh no, Usos going to win. So they're trying to come up with these matches, and they're told who's winning, and then it's getting changed on them, so they have to come up with different endings, and then they have to switch it back, and they have to come up with a new thing. So I don't know, the chaos behind the scenes kind of surprised me. I would have thought, like, they had these scripts, like, I don't know, like, being a writer, I would have thought that they would have things like booked out at least a couple months in advance, and like scripts and storylines, and that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, there's several articles that have gone around that I've taken a peek at. One of them was wrestlers that found out, last minute that their match was going to change. Now, this article I read before this last Mania, which everybody was talking about how the rumor was Roman got word as Brock was making his entrance that the match result had changed, that it was no longer going to be Roman that won, but it was going to be Lesnar that was going to win. And there was one about Jericho in there. Him finding out last minute that he was going to be the first ever undisputed champion, and just a lot of those types of scenarios and where they were and what kind of the setting was for them finding that out. So hearing you say that Vince will change his mind on the fly more than just once in a day, none of that really surprises me. It's just interesting to hear. One, because there's so many cameras on these people at all times that you've got to wonder, how do they edit out different reactions, or how do they keep their reactions to themselves? Because you don't want to have a ref, lean to you and then all of a sudden your facial expression lights up like, oh, and then that gives something away. But props to the guys for rolling with the punches. Now, one thing,
there's actually a couple stories in the book that kind of go into that as well. With Jinder Mahal talks about when he was told he was winning the championship, he didn't believe it, and he said, like, he kept waiting for someone, like, okay, he's backstage, they tell him he's winning, and then he's like, okay, I'm sure someone's going to change it. And, he goes to Gorilla, and he's looking around, and no one's telling him anything different. But he thought when he got to the ring, he said until he actually won and they gave him the belt, he thought that it wasn't going to happen. Wow. And talking to the creative team about Mania, they told me, like, they thought that Roman was winning. Like, the creative team was already writing the scripts for Raw based off Roman winning, and then he didn't win.
Wow.
Yeah, the when Ronda Rousey came out at the Royal Rumble, the creative team said they didn't know she was there. That they heard the music play and they all looked at each other like, "What?" Like so. It's one of those things where like I think there's like Vince's level of knowledge, and he probably lets Triple H know, and then the creative team, right? And even though they're all working together, I think they like to keep those secrets because you never know where the leaks are coming from.
Oh, I know. I hate the leaks too. I'm not a fan. And here I'm a guy that works in media, right? Where we like, the inside scoop and breaking news. But there's so many Twitter accounts out there that, try to leak this or that leak that. And part of me, I understand, I respect it, but at the same time, it's like if you're WWE, you gotta, axe these leaks because it's really taken away from a lot of moments. I remember, where there weren't leaks and your source of any inside scoop was reading online wrestling forums. And if a superstar was going to return, you got like a real life pop, when that music hit and you were watching and you jumped up off your couch, and so gone are those days, and it kind of stings a little bit. But, NXT and the main roster seem to be treated and appreciated in so many different ways. And NXT is really that, underground music scene that all the kids go to every weekend, and they don't care like who's performing. It's just the time to get out and go and enjoy what's happening. And it's just like, it's this club, it's this clique. And then the main roster is, all the signed bands that are going on to sell out arenas and all the pyrotechnics and everything, where, you have NXT that they have fewer pay-per-view events, and their storylines kind of take a little bit longer to play out, and their stories are told more in the ring as opposed to promos and storylines. And I don't know if it's because of the network, if it's because we see something for the main roster multiple times a week, or what it is, but do you feel like the term oversaturated would be kind of what describes what we're seeing here as far as why people like NXT and maybe don't like the main roster, or even vice versa?
It's interesting because I actually wrote the book on NXT as well. So I've been the performance center, and I've been like behind the scenes. I sat down. I got to shadow Triple H for a day while he was, interacting with the employees and the wrestlers.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. So, it's interesting. A lot of what Hunter says is that, they're lucky. They have an hour of programming. Like you said, there's not a pay-per-view, every month. It's a lot simpler, I think. And I think since Triple H is the one overseeing everything, he's really got his hands on everything from like the creative to the matches. When I was actually at the Performance Center, I got to see, Finn and Kevin Owens were practicing like, a promo where Kevin was going to be on a ladder, and then he was going to like run out. Finn was going to grab the ladder and throw it. And what was funny is I was sitting there, and Triple H was teaching Finn Balor how to throw a ladder out of the ring, and he was trying to like javelin throw it, and every time he threw it, it like bounced and landed where the crowd would be. And he did it like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, and Hunter kept laughing. And then finally he's like, all right, you're not throwing the ladder, it's just not working. Like, so I think Hunter has a lot to do with it. It's just that he's there all the time, and he's working on these matches, and he's helping like write the storylines, and he's helping oversee everything. And I just think, Hunter's a creative genius, and you're seeing it play out on NXT. And, I think eventually, he'll probably take over the reins of WWE as well. And it'll be interesting to see what he does with it. But, it's tough. I think if I was in charge of, Raw, the first thing I do is not make it 3 hours. I think it's such a long haul, and I enjoy watching SmackDown more than Raw, not just for the performers, but I think like they're a little snappier, it's a little quicker. That extra hour just is draining to me. And I love the show, but even me sitting through it is like, oh man, still got another hour. Uh,
Yeah, 3 hours is a lot. And, I don't have regular cable, so I watch the 90-minute Hulu one the day after. So, one, I hate missing all the authentic reactions, on social media and Twitter, which I'm heavily on day to day. But, two, there's a few things I miss. I miss a lot more with Raw in the 90-minute Hulu recap than I do with SmackDown, obviously, because there's a whole hour difference. But Survivor Series, the last one of the year, well, I mean, the last of the big four anyway, and it sets us up kind of for the Rumble. Usually it's a lot of closure, and, SmackDown not winning anything, and I say that knowing full well that the tag team match was won by SmackDown, but nobody chooses to acknowledge that one. But what do you make of the sweep? And now that we are in a time post-Roman Reigns, so to speak, like where do you see dominoes falling? We have injuries. Kevin Owens is out. Dean Ambrose is back. There's a few different players that could get moved. I don't know how they would, because John Cena and apparently Brie Bella are the only free agents that can bounce around from show to show. And then, of course, you have SmackDown doing title changes 2 years in a row, the SmackDown before a major event. Like, what did you feel about Survivor Series? I personally thought it was the best of the big four this year, probably the main roster's best pay-per-view all year as far as match quality. But now, your reaction to it and what you see going into 2019.
Oh, I agree. I actually had a great time watching Survivor Series. I thought Daniel Bryan, Brock Lesnar blew me away. It's funny because I really wanted to see the Brock Lesnar AJ Styles rematch because I was hoping AJ would get his win back.
Yeah.
But and to be honest, I was a little concerned for Daniel Bryan. Like, I know he's been cleared to come back, but just knowing Brock's moveset and how he dumps everyone on the head and neck, and I mean that's just the moves that he does. And man, like I was a little worried. It made me uncomfortable watching it at first, and that was just because like I really like Daniel a lot, and he's a cool guy, and I would have hated for anything to happen. But man, did they suck me into that match, and it was such a good story that they told in the ring. And then the referee gets knocked down. Daniel does the what is now like the most common WWE move. It's they hit someone in the balls. That seems to be where everything's going right now. But then the match changed, and when Brock's knee gave out, when he went to do the finish, and then Daniel put him in the yes lock. Like, man, I was like, that was just such a great moment. And I know Brock came out with the win, but I thought both of them came out looking amazing. That's the kind of Brock Lesnar match where if he did more often, people wouldn't boo him all the time of like, oh, I can't believe he's the champ. That was just a great match. I thought Charlotte Ronda Rousey was another amazing match. It's interesting to me, the people booing Ronda, because I think since she's been involved, she's been fantastic. Her matches are very unique. They're not like the normal style. And I thought what her and Charlotte did out there was just great stuff. And and the beating, man, that was such a violent ending to that match. The likes I can't remember in the women's division. And it was so well done. And it was cool to see evil Charlotte. I think heel Charlotte, it's the flair, man. Like it runs in the family. I like her as a heel.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that one. And it's going to be interesting now to see. I mean, it was such a heartbreaker for Becky to have to miss that, especially with how well it was built up. So now you have apparently Psycho Charlotte, and you have heel Becky, if you even call her that, and then whatever's going on with Ronda. And, to your point, I do agree Ronda has been fantastic in the ring, especially for somebody so green and so new with a background that it's hard to flip that switch, as we saw from Lesnar when he came back against Cena and full-on punched him in the face and broke open his lip. It's a switch, and it's hard to turn off, when you get into that sort of animalistic instinct of, fight and then, of course, WWE style fighting. But I think, and I'll speak strictly on behalf of myself, it's the wrestling world, the wrestling culture, or the WWE universe, as they call it, is one, not only fickle, but it's kind of like we don't like to be told what to do, especially when it comes to who to like. And Evolution was a great moment. It was a great pay-per-view, great talent on it. But I think a lot of people didn't like that Ronda Rousey was at the sort of center and forefront of anything when she's had little to nothing to do with what 99% of that roster for that event had done over the last decade. And I think that's where people get a little sour on new faces, is they don't like it being forced on you, which is why Roman Reigns had such a hard time finally getting over. And then when it's the day that he breaks character to announce a real life thing, that all of a sudden people decide to change their minds. So I don't think it's really anything about her talent whatsoever. I think people just have to kind of warm up to her. And when you have Charlotte at the top of her game and Becky at the top of her game, there can only be one really at the top of the mountain. And yeah, Ronda's on Raw and they're on SmackDown, but SmackDown has been kind of the A show lately, and I'm excited to see what happens moving forward. What do you think? What's your take on Raw moving forward with the absence of Roman Reigns now? Because it seems like he's kind of been absent, as far as it took him forever to put the title on him, but he was always in that picture, and now he's not.
It'll be fascinating to see. Like, I love Drew McIntyre. I think he's definitely got a rocket strapped to him toward the top. But yeah, do you do Drew versus Brock? Like, it's interesting because Brock gets booed so much, right? That I don't think they're gonna turn. Drew shouldn't be a face. But then, are they going to do a heel main event of WrestleMania? I just don't see it. Maybe there's like a multi-man match. There's all these rumors that Braun Strowman's injured now too. That he needs elbow surgery, and then someone said something about his knees. You don't know like what's really the truth there, and if he'll be gone. Otherwise, I really thought Braun should have probably won the title. It was his time. I think like the longer they push him off of not winning, it's not going to create a bigger pop when he actually wins. It's almost like discrediting like how cool he was. Like, I think they're losing the moment that they had with him. Like, for a while he was so amazing, and everybody was jumping up to see what kind of crazy stunt Braun was going to do that week. And it's almost like they waited too long to pull the trigger, and they lost their moment. But he's awesome, and he's such a huge guy that I don't understand like why they're waiting on him so much, because it seems like if Vince McMahon put together like what kind of big man would I like, he seems like the prototypical like big man action figure that Vince would want to play with. Like he's huge, he's fast. People were loving him. So yeah, I don't know why it's taken so long. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like, maybe somebody. I'm kind of curious. I'm just throwing this out. I don't know anything, but maybe AJ wins the Royal Rumble and challenges Brock at WrestleMania, and that's why they switched it with Daniel at Survivor Series, and that way they can move AJ to Raw to be the champion.
Yeah, I heard that rumor too, and that'll be interesting to see, because AJ Styles has always been Team Blue. It's like what Edge was for SmackDown for so long. AJ was that.
Yeah, and then there's also rumors. I mean, if The Rock was signed, if he agreed to come back for this WrestleMania to face Roman, is he still floating out there? Like, is he looking for a match? Are they going to try to do Brock versus The Rock? Does The Rock win? I mean, that's box office.
Yeah.
It's. I know the WWE universe would be. I don't know. Like, do you get mad at The Rock coming back though? He's still The Rock. But like, it is, part-timer versus a guy who's going to come back for, one match or two matches.
Yeah, you can't win that one.
But if you're trying to draw mainstream audience and the co-main events are Rock, Brock, and Ronda Rousey, Becky, or Ronda Rousey, Becky, Charlotte in a triple threat, having Ronda, Brock, and The Rock on the poster, man, you're going to sell a lot of tickets.
Yeah, and, so as somebody who has done their due diligence and really, gotten their hands dirty in this as far as the creating the Mania. So here's the last two questions I have for you. The first one is, why build Mania a full year in advance, knowing that you're playing the odds at that point with injuries? And we saw it with The Rock and Cena, where all of Cena's matches were really watered down because they didn't want to have him risk injury. I mean, my God, he had an ambulance match with Kane, and there was nothing spectacular about it, and we all knew that. And so I feel like if you're gonna do that, don't play dumb with us. Just be honest. And, if he's going to do more promos than wrestling, that's fine. And it was perfectly fine because they were two of the best at doing promos like they did week in and week out. But we saw Miz and Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam, which is that's one of the big four. That's number 2 on the list of pay-per-views. But then we saw it, again, right after that, and this was a match that we all thought had WrestleMania written all over it. We've seen, we're going to see Dean Ambrose against Seth Rollins at TLC. We saw John Cena versus Shinsuke Nakamura on SmackDown, and then we saw John Cena versus Roman Reigns at Backlash. It was one of the. So it's like you're doing all this planning a year in advance, but yet we're seeing these matches, which yes, they're at events that still need to sell tickets, but I don't understand that if you can build Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey in a month and have it not even happen and yet still be one of the most buzzed about potential matchups, why you would spend a full year trying to make all these dominoes fall just right for something that you could easily do, with the right people in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, especially because, they're all about, they always say, oh, we listen to our audience. Well, if you do, I don't see how, you can listen for a year of them, crapping on a wrestler and then be like, oh, yeah, he's in the main event. If you're going to listen, then, should take it month by month as opposed to, a year in advance. But, yeah, I mean, it's weird. I think they're shifting a little bit. Like I said, they used to have almost the whole card booked out a year in advance, and now, last year they had the one match, and this year, I think, I haven't been in contact with them, with the creative team at all since the book came out, but I could just picture them, coming up with a million ideas and pitching Vince. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's up to Vince who he wants to put as his champion, and who knows? Maybe Brock wins at WrestleMania and he's still a champion, and then we'll see him again in 6 months. I think that they see Brock as a special attraction, and I'd be all for it if he wasn't the champ. If we just saw Brock versus Daniel Bryan and Brock, wasn't the champ, or if he gave that type of match once every 3 months and he was just there for pay-per-views, but he wasn't the champ, I would be like, oh, those are all cool matches. But, him being the champ and the champion not being on the show, I think that's what kind of irks a lot of people. You talked about, what the show could do better. I remember back in the day, WCW used to have, the television champion. I used to really like that. The TV champ would be on the show, and there'd be, a 10-minute time limit, but you knew, he was always going to have a match. that's what I kind of liked about like the open challenge of like the U.S. title or the Intercontinental title. Like
Yeah.
when they, those were always the best matches, right? Like the champ needs to be on the show. Like this isn't like the old days where like, you watched an hour on Saturday morning and, every once in a while Hulk Hogan would come on to give a promo and it was about like a local match or something. Like, now like people want to see the champ. I think that's why, no matter what you thought of Roman when he won the championship, at least like he said, he was going to be there and he was going to defend the belt. And, I think people were excited about that. And who knows? I mean, I don't know how long it'll take for Roman to come back. Or if he does come back, I'm thinking like a couple years. But when he does come back, I mean, he is going to be the most over wrestler. He's probably going to be the most popular guy that I could think of, because I mean, who wouldn't want to root for him at this point?
Yeah, exactly. It's the irony, isn't it?
Yeah, they worked all this time of how to get Roman over, and it's such an unfortunate circumstance, and it's not about when he comes back. It's about him getting his life together and battling leukemia. But when he's ready and he does come back, I mean, he is going to be the superstar. Like whoever goes against him, man, is going to get booed out of the building.
So the last question for you, speaking of building things a year in advance. Now, I'm not saying that they do this for Survivor Series, but they very well could, because it is their end of the year, pay-per-view, their last big hoorah. But, the WWE main roster has a time each year where it kind of purges itself. There's a lot of superstars that are future endeavored, and they're also notorious for calling up NXT talent after big pay-per-views, one or two per show, Raw and SmackDown. There's been a lot of talk, and I don't know what started this, but I've seen more and more of it about bringing back the invasion angle. Now, of course, we saw that when there was the whole acquisition of WCW and ECW, Shane versus Vince, and I was a huge fan of that. I thought it really gave sort of a fantasy scenario brought to life, even though we knew that it couldn't be one way as opposed to another because of all the, behind the scenes stuff that got leaked out and brought to the forefront. But, NXT did an invasion as Nexus, and to some people's, thinking, it actually was a pretty good angle itself, and we saw that culminate at Survivor Series, much like the invasion. So a year from now, there's some stuff that needs to happen on the main roster, and NXT roster right now is stacked in my mind. Velveteen Dream, Aleister Black now is back, Johnny Gargano, and then we have the Undisputed Era, which I wholeheartedly believe could be the next evolution if done right, and I would love to see them lead an invasion of NXT to the main roster. And it seems like they kind of tease at stuff like that, but then they don't follow through, and us fans are sitting at the edge of our seat being like, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Like, I think it would be awesome. Your thoughts on a year from now, Survivor Series bringing to a head an invasion angle of that nature?
And that would be awesome. I think it should happen sooner than a year from now. I mean, Undisputed Era is such a fantastic, entertaining group that, like, I think they could be, headliners. I think they can, invade right now. Just they don't need anyone else to go with them, and I would love to see them go and shake things up. Like you said, Aleister Black. I mean, I would love to see him on the main roster, just because, if Undertaker is going to be, around for 1 or 2 more years, I think, that's a true passing of the torch type match that can happen. Is let Aleister Black retire Undertaker and give him that rub. I don't know how much longer Undertaker wants to wrestle, or like is going to stick around. But if this is his last WrestleMania of next year, I would love to see Aleister Black get that opportunity. Ricochet is a guy that I look at that, man, he has the potential to be that kids love him, right? Like,
yep.
he does the type of moves that, like, it doesn't matter what type of fan you are, casual, hardcore, you watch what he's doing and, like, you stop what you're doing and want to watch more, and you want to go online and watch his older matches. when he was in Lucha Underground, like he was the type of guy that like my kids would like, oh my God, when's Prince Puma coming on? Like, they knew nothing about Lucha Underground, but they knew who Prince Puma was, and that they had to watch his matches. So like when he came to NXT, it was like, wait, I know those tattoos, But I think Ricochet, he can come in. He's an interesting guy, right? Like, say they have, like I said, Brock Lesnar versus The Rock, or Brock versus Braun, or Drew as the headline, and you have Ronda Rousey versus Becky. What if Ricochet is a surprise entrant, or one of the Undisputed Era? What if one of them wins the Royal Rumble and goes against SmackDown, and they have Adam Cole versus Daniel Bryan, or Ricochet Daniel Bryan? Like, it didn't have to. They can win and challenge for the title and not be the main event, and introduce them to the biggest audience in one shot and have them win, and you have an instant star.
Yeah, I think they're sitting on golden opportunity. And yeah, I mean, if they do it within a year, like before a year from now, I'm all for it, because they're not above, creating ridiculous pay-per-views, Great Balls of Fire and such, and having them turn out to be better than what was advertised and expected. So it's going to be an interesting 2019, to say the least. I'm curious to see, to watch what happened last night on Raw, what happens tonight on SmackDown, and then see kind of what direction they start to steer things, because now the focus is set on the Rumble, of course, which my hope was that it was going to be Daniel Bryan winning it, because that's sort of that, he's reached the point in his career where it's just checklist stuff now. He's a Grand Slam champion, but it's like he hasn't won a Rumble, and people really wanted to see him versus Miz at Mania. I thought Miz was going to win at Super Showdown, get the title. I don't know how him against Brock would have gone over, hindsight being what it is, but I was really hoping to see that culminate at Mania. And it still very well could, but it's just the way that they've approached certain things on SmackDown, knowing the amount of talent and the story that they have pretty much written for itself there, has been really interesting. But John, man, such a great conversation with you. I don't always get, so much wrestling talk, especially from people that have been in it. And you, obviously, with your book, Creating the Mania, and it's I'm excited to read it now, really am, and I will make sure that I get that on my bookshelf and don't put it down until I'm done, because I'm so curious about some of the stuff in there now. But it's Jon Robinson. You can follow him on Twitter at JRobandSteel, author, Creating the Mania, where he got to shadow pretty much all the people that we love to hate here in the world of wrestling, is the wrestling universe. But John, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, no, that was awesome. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. You have a good one. We'll talk soon.
All right, you too, man.
All right, and once again, a big thank you to Mr. Jon Robinson for joining me here on the debut of the Wrestling Division Special for the F.A.N Show. And don't forget to give him a follow on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram and Snapchat. And then, of course, if you miss any of these episodes, well, then you've got to subscribe. Plain and simple. Subscribe. iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and, of course, Spreaker.com. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, best of luck to you and yours. Go Niners, and it's all fun and games until you butt fumble. Good night.
Do you remember the time that Mark Sanchez ran into his own player's butt? That was funny sports.
Thank you for having me on the show, man. I love the F.A.N Show.